Joji's latest album, Smithereens, is one of the most confusing and inconsistent listening experiences I've ever had the displeasure of listening to. I don't really know what word to use, it really is that off-putting. There's a real sense of whiplash that comes with the second disc in particular, which is such a drastic fall from grace when compared to the beginning of the record, that I genuinely can't believe this album was ultimately released. Now, I know this might seem like a really cynical and negative intro, but the highlights on this thing are some of the greatest sounding tracks in years, which just makes some of the more mid moments that much more perplexing. As always, I'll go through this album track by track, but let's introduce some structure to this review first and talk about George's last project for a second. Nectar was an incredible step forward for Joji in everything he had worked on previously. The highs are really goddamn high. Tracks like Run, Gimme Love, Sanctuary, Ooh, Modus, and Like You Do are really good tracks, and would have made for a killer EP. Unfortunately, there's another 2/3 to this album that vary from mid to intolerable, like 777 and Reanimator, most of which are in the latter half of the project. It was simply too inconsistent and long to be deemed a great album in my eyes, but I certainly appreciated the risks that were being taken and the steps forward in terms of vocal delivery and writing, as well as a step up in production. In my opinion, it was Joji's best album to date, slightly edging Ballads 1. Now, with all of that being said, it's pretty easy to understand why we were so excited for Smithereens to be released initially. In my eyes, the groundwork had already been laid. Nectar was such a perfect blueprint from which to improve upon, and for Joji to reach a new level of consistency and beauty. And when the single Glimpse of Us released, it seemed as though the album was really going in that direction, as it seemed to fix every issue that Joji had ever had in the past. It was nothing particularly new in terms of theming or writing, but it was the greatest possible version of what Joji had been making previously. So understandably, I, along with many others, had pretty high hopes. But then the album finally released and, well, to say the least, it wasn't what we were all expecting. The first thing you'll notice is the abnormally short length of the record, which was a slight shock considering the long hiatus. Now, this isn't necessarily something worth criticizing, because shortening an album is one of the most sensical and logical methods of trimming the fat and maintaining the aforementioned sense of consistency that Nectar lacked. Now, the extent to which Smithereens achieved this, I'll get to as we analyze each track, so let's begin doing so. The album couldn't have opened stronger with Glimpse of Us. This is undoubtedly Joji's best work, and I don't think it's possible for me to be convinced otherwise. It's one of the most emotional and touching ballads in years. I'm sure I don't need to explain what it's about, but for clarity, it details a seemingly perfect current relationship that, despite the romance at hand, continues to trigger memories of a past lover who Joji continues to yearn for. The lyrics are all so earned and genuinely heart-wrenching, with some of Joji's boldest and most decisive vocal delivery yet. The piano is simple and somber as to allow focus on said lyrics, but still manages to maintain a very pretty sound. It hits so hard and packs such an emotional punch. It's a truly beautiful song, and a contender for Song of the Year. It's one that you just can't be cynical about. It masters the balance between genius musicianship and generic romance songs. It's like Ed Sheeran, but good. Some may argue for a little more power in Joji's voice, and whilst that would certainly be a little interesting, I think that this lazier, for lack of a better word, delivery makes the song's vibe distinctively Joji, creating his own sound. Feeling Like the End is also very worthy of compliments. The trappy instrumental and hi-hats are quite charming and work well with the vibe. The flow is tight and sweet, and the overall sound is just bloody good. I do think it could use some other ideas because it's a pretty short track that didn't need to be as short as it was. It's just a very dense and delightful 2 minutes of pretty and nice sounding music. There isn't too much to say about this one. Die For You is another major highlight that makes an extremely successful connection with the listeners. Much like the opening track, the tune is simple, which I believe is when Joji is at his best. I think the chord progression, despite it not being too difficult, is really technical and displays a great knowledge and prowess from Joji in the production side of things. It's a beautifully written and romantic track with a really dreamy instrumental that does a brilliant job continuing the vibe of the album. What more could you ask for? I'm a big fan in particular of the line, "I used to be somebody in another skin," which is both an allusion to how the character was a completely different person in the relationship he's singing about, but I also see it as a reference to Joji's Pink Guy days, literally being in another skin, which is always nice to see. I really love this one. My only complaint again is just that it isn't longer. It's not a short song by any means, but I just enjoy it so much that another verse definitely wouldn't have overstayed its welcome in the same way it might have done with Glimpse of Us. Before the Day Is Over, once again, is a very nice track. It impressively puts the feeling of yearning for affection but not wanting to be a burden burden into groups of clear and succinct verses, along with a very sugary yet quite dreary sounding chorus. It's relatively well done and there's not too much to complain about. The only thing I would say is that Joji doesn't have much versatility in terms of theming. Most of his songs are sad boy love tunes, and it sometimes gets a little bit old. I'd love to see a little more experimentation from this artist in terms of writing. Now, if you're a Joji fan, you probably enjoyed the video up until this point, and I'm sorry to tell you that you might not like what's to come. So, Dissolve has the same problem that I feel like Feeling Like the End did, except it's so much more prominent this time, and that's that it feels horrendously and utterly incomplete. There is absolutely no personality to this tune, and the production is really bland and uninteresting. I don't know why, but there's a really jarring auto-tune effect on these vocals as well, and the writing isn't anything to write home about either. All of the sounds that are supposedly meant to aid alongside the guitar chords just feel far too loose and amateur. Some of the trademarked Joji harmonies are decent ear honey, but it's nothing that we haven't heard a million times already, and it's nowhere near enough to save an otherwise boring track. The end has a really strange and abrupt stop and build-up that I see as a desperate attempt to add something unique to the experience, but it ultimately just falls flat and makes the instrumentation even more unorganized. Not a fan of this one at all. Knight Rider is the beginning of disc 2, which, just as a side note, the fact that there are 2 discs seems a little pretentious and dumb. It's only a 24-minute record. You could have just released the first 4 songs and made a brilliant EP with 2 of the best songs this year. But instead we get this bollocks. I can't believe this song made it onto this thing. It might be my least favourite so far. It's embarrassing and terrible. The
Too precious
hook is a tacky and off-key, stupidly sloppy part of this song. The production is messy in the worst way possible, and I don't care about anything that's being said, nor how it's being said. It's almost impressive how Joji can simultaneously have one of the year's best singles and one of the year's worst songs on the same album. Blah 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 demo is quite frankly pretty worthless trash. Which I know you might not like to hear, but that's what I genuinely think about this thing. Even the title seems as though it couldn't care less. No, seriously, why is this self-proclaimed demo being deemed finished material? It has demo in the title and it really does sound like a demo. It's completely inappropriate to put it on your 4th studio album. This isn't a song, Joji. It's just noise. It's just mindless noise with one of the worst and most jarring beat switch ups since Bad Guy. There's nothing special about these basic-ass lyrics either. There is nothing noteworthy about this thing, and I would hesitate to even call it a song. This one's not the worst. It's certainly the best of the second disc, but once again, why is there an interlude after a demo on a 24-minute album with 2 discs? This is not ambitious or experimental, it's just lazy and tacky and try-hard. The instrumental, to be honest, sounds like some Minecraft music, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Minecraft has a killer-ass soundtrack. I actually quite like the sound and rhythm of this chorus, and I appreciate the pretty playful theme of just aimless wandering in various vehicles. I'm a fan of some of the writing here too. The piano melody is fair and inviting. There's just a more complete vibe to this song, except the abrupt ending, which was slightly insulting. It's not amazing or anything, but it's grown on me since first listen, and it's certainly serviceable. 1am Freestyle is another really boring and useless one. A song that, despite being under 2 minutes, feels about 3 times that much. Why are there so many writers? There's barely any lyrics. Did you hire a writer for every word on the track? Songs like this and Knight Rider do have interesting ideas, but they just aren't songs to me. They're mere sketches that I'm totally uninterested in. What a disappointing experience. So what we're left with at the end of this 24-minute experience is 2 great songs, a whole lot of midness, and a fair bit of trash. The biggest issue to reiterate here is that it seems to me that Joji didn't try at all, and he removed his cake halfway through baking, so it doesn't taste good yet. Despite having some good qualities and interesting ideas, it's just a spreadsheet in song form of random ideas and lyrics and melodies that don't fit together at all. It's like if an animated movie just released a storyboard and some lines from the script. You can see the blueprints for something brilliant, but it just needed more time in the oven. That being said, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to label this project as bad either, because the highs are so unbelievably high. I'm giving Smithereens by Joji an underwhelming 5 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching. A like and comment and subscription would be very much appreciated. I'll catch you all later. Much love.